Good afternoon, and welcome to Burke Auditorium for today's Sabin Series lecture at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. My name is John D'Agostino, and I'm happy to introduce today's panel discussion on Connecticut's innovation ecosystem. To those of you in the audience or listening at home, welcome. The Sabin Sustainable Venture Prize and Speaker Series are organized by the Yale Center for Business and the Environment through the generous support of the Andrew Sabin Family Foundation. The Sabin Prize itself is a $25,000 award to the top student and faculty for-profit ventures advancing a more sustainable world. So with that, I will turn it over to today's moderator, Ben Berkowitz, CEO and co-founder of SeeClickFix, a New Haven-grown startup and leader in government 2.0 technology.
Cool. Ahead, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming out during finals, I hear. So we have Derek Koch, who is a graduate of the Kellogg School of Management. He runs independent software here in New Haven and is a key contributor to the growing Connecticut ecosystem. He also is a manager of what is known as the Grid, which is New Haven's new innovation hub that's going to be launching soon. And we have Tim Coates, who will be joining us shortly, but Casey Pickett is a graduate of FES and SOM and is the Director of Innovation for the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, where he makes Connecticut a better place for young, innovative companies.
Or tries.
Or tries. He's helped us, so I can testify to this. To frame the conversation for the next hour or so, we're talking about Connecticut's growing entrepreneurial community. My company has been here for kind of about 4 years as a company, and I've really seen it take off, especially in New Haven. We're talking specifically about why local community matters to entrepreneurs, to folks growing their tech companies, their businesses, and how an active community of entrepreneurs can support additional innovation. How do you use this network to grow your venture, and how do we build a community together in Connecticut that really pushes us ahead and into the future? I will say I am definitely biased towards New Haven. I came here by way of Yale, but not the university. I came through the hospital by way of my mother. I grew up in Westville. I went off to George Washington University, and I came back after 4 years there and decided that I would really commit to this town. I've had, I think, a really good run at growing my business here. It has been a place where we have had phenomenal access to talent on the engineering side, on the business side, on the marketing side. We've had phenomenal support from the local government, the state government, community members, and it's really been a place where there's enough interesting to inspire you, but not too much to distract you, and it's been a really great place to focus. So I guess with that, Tim will get here when he gets here.
He's coming in by parachute.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can see that. There's a hatch.
Ben, can I pause you?
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious, how many people in the audience are developing a venture through the Sabin and Sabatka prize system? Awesome. Next year. Cool.
So why don't we jump in with some questions? I have 9 or 10 questions for these guys, and then feel free to just raise your hand and shut me up whenever, or shut them up and jump in if you want. So why does community matter to entrepreneurs?
I mean, if you don't mind, I'll start out.
So community matters mostly because it solves problems that entrepreneurs face. Startups require an incredible amount of resources in the form of capital and a lot of the things that Ben already touched on. So I think he's already exposed you to the answer. City and state support, communities of customers, beta users. Being an entrepreneur can be a really lonely road. So actually even having emotional support from people who are your peers is incredibly important, and you probably experience this in your program as well. It's not unlike preparing for midterms or finals every day. So that's what I would say.
That's a good analogy, right? I mean, it is like working on a really hard problem for a class that is just easier to do if you have access to other smart people who see the problem differently and can bring in other ideas. An idea is a network itself, and any new idea is a combination of a couple of existing ideas, and that spark that connects new ideas into some new combination can either happen inside of one person's head, but seems more often to happen in a coffee shop or in a study group and get written down on the back of a napkin. It's just easier to have great ideas when you've got a lot of other smart people around thinking up cool ideas.
Yeah, it also helps to have access to multiple refrigerators. If you find yourself low on cash and the final decides whether you eat or not, that it usually helps to have a partner who has a full refrigerator or a pad you can crash in. And I only say that half jokingly. It can be quite grueling and demanding. So yeah, it definitely helps to have a co-founder, partners, but even people outside your company who just are rooting for you, who really want you to succeed. I think Ben's, one of the reasons that Ben's company succeeded is they've done a phenomenal job of attracting just a great community of people who care about what SeeClickFix does. And yeah, that's what a startup's all about, engaging people in what you're doing and getting them to care at the end of the day.
Having friends who understand that Sunday dinner is ramen noodles is important, I guess, right?
Sunday breakfast?
Right.
Or dinner.
Right. So what are you guys doing specifically with your organizations individually in New Haven to build community?
All right. Well, so I could start. We've been doing actually quite a bit, and Ben's been involved. A lot of entrepreneurs have been involved, and I think that's really important, that any kind of community can be built by lots of people, but the entrepreneurs really do have to take a leadership role because they actually know what they need. They know what other entrepreneurs need, so they do a lot better job of creating the kind of structures and support that will work. But in New Haven, we've been working for, probably between 3 and 4 years on the idea of how to build a vibrant startup community. And we're entering a new phase with the state's public-private partnership, CTNEXT, the innovation ecosystem. But, a lot of the things we've been doing come down to individual connections, finding out how we can help one person. I think anybody who's ever built a community, probably Ben included, I think recognizes that while you can use social media, you can use events, you need to be very consistent in your approach in building community, that at the end of the day, it comes down to individual relationships. And I think that's a great segue to our most recent participant here, Tim Coates.
So we're surprised. We thought you were coming in by parachute.
That would have been awesome. Just drop right in. Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. Traffic.
I ran here from Hartford.
Tim is the managing director of CTNEXT initiative to strengthen CT's innovation ecosystem. He has a master's in public policy. Did I got the acronym right? Yeah.
You did.
From Harvard Kennedy School. And we were just picking these guys' brains about what they are doing as individuals and organizations to build community in New Haven. I'll jump to you. Derek, we need to make sure to get back to you, and you have to talk about Startup Weekend before we get off this topic, I think, as well.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. You have thoughts on that?
What's the
A couple
question?
of examples of things that we're doing to build community around the state. Derek's talking about New Haven, but talking about some of the other.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting. I think the way that I think about this is the state's trying to do. We are trying to marry systems, so system of entrepreneur support. So if we think about education and you've got grade 1 and grade 2 and grade 3, entrepreneurs go through a very similar type of staging. And so you've got people who are starting with a concept and a thought. They then have an idea that gets formed into something more sophisticated, and they go staging.
You got a
I don't
wicked
run.
Canadian accent.
I don't run and talk at the same time exactly for this reason. And so we have this very systemic approach to helping support entrepreneurship. And I think the other piece of all of this is also making sticky communities. And so how do we layer that systemic approach with this real grassroots opportunity? So I think from where I sit, looking at all these innovation hubs across the state, and have you guys talked about that?
Not really.
So the way this whole project's organized is that there are 4 innovation hubs, New Haven being one of them, Stanford, Hartford, and Storrs being the others. And so we've got people just like Derek in each of these other communities.
Not quite.
Not at Derek's stature.
Thank you.
Not at Derek's stature, but also quite good. And so really what our effort is, how do we build statewide communities amongst these leaders in each innovation hub? And so one of the things we've been doing is hosting monthly meetings to share best practices, and also to think about how do we build that system together. And so those, I think, from where I sit, is really one of the things that we're doing.
Right, so Tim and Derek are operating at somewhat different levels. Derek is the manager of the grid, which is the effort to create a hub of innovation in New Haven, amp up what's already happening here. Innovation hub is an aspirational term. The idea is that we layer enough entrepreneurial activities, training, competitions, mentorship, education events, so that eventually New Haven and these other places, Stanford, Hartford, Storrs, get known colloquially as hubs of innovation. So it's an aspirational term. But Derek is working to create this local network and these layerings of activities. Tim is working with all 4 of those innovation hub efforts to create community among all of the Dereks and all the other people that Derek has built around him, so that there are lots of different sort of interlocking communities, and Tim is engaging that bigger network of networks, as it were.
Yeah, just a plug for the importance of Tim's role. It's important that entrepreneurs lead communities like this, but one of the things that is true is that an entrepreneur might go off and, for example, start something like Make Haven, like a series of entrepreneurs did in New Haven just recently, a makerspace that's incredible. It's gaining a lot of traction, but a lot of those entrepreneurs have businesses that they're running. So one of the problems with communities like this is if the entrepreneurs are out there doing a lot of great, crazy stuff, sometimes it is a lot of one-off. It doesn't generate a lot of community. So the idea of creating structure and some consistency and repeatability is actually really, really important if you want to develop a community over 10 years that becomes something, great. Right. It may not be like Silicon Valley exactly. It might be its own kind of unique thing, but it's repeating itself, it's creating itself continually, and it doesn't require kind of as much active management. So the structural piece and what Tim's doing is really, really key.
And I think what's interesting too, it's really, so I'm a policy person, and when we think about how do we solve really difficult problems, where not any one organization can help solve that problem by itself. You've got to have all these different people really bringing their minds, bringing their energy to that issue, and then trying to figure out, well, how do we all connect on this problem to make sure that we're actually solving it? Because if we forget all these different factors that we don't see because we're really narrowly focused on, I've only got kind of bioscience, or I've only got, pre-seed funding. There's stages on that continuum that get missed. And so really wanting to make sure that where Casey and I sit at a 30,000-foot level, that each of those different stages is one, taken care of, but then two, also, how do we make sure we keep on getting better at supporting that?
So I make a T-shirt. It says New Haven, it's better than your town. If I had a choice, I would not think outside of the geopolitical boundaries of our city. However, running a business, I have had to think that way. SeeClickFix has really had the benefit of attracting talent from around the state and out of state and getting folks to move here. But we have folks that commute from West Hartford and other parts of the state. How do we think about New Haven in the context of the state? I mean, aside from these various Derek's counterparts in other parts of the state, but there's a lot of talent hiding inside these really boring insurance companies and sports networks, and they're awesome. And some of them work for us now. I think it's a tremendous opportunity, and people are always, I think, very shocked when they find out that there is talent that exists in Connecticut outside of New Haven. How do we help people?
Go for it.
I think that's exactly from a design or policy perspective. A lot of the research that we were doing to figure out how to bolster the existing efforts around creating more vibrant entrepreneurial communities in Connecticut. When you go and check out Boston and New York, what you find is that Boston is the tech and entrepreneurship capital of New England, the Northeast, until Bloomberg started ramping up the New York stuff. But it's not just that it's Boston, and it's not even that it's Cambridge. It's 7 square blocks that make up Kendall Square. That's ground zero of entrepreneurship in the whole Northeast, and it's basically all concentrated there, and everybody wants to be. Every smart person is out there looking for all the other smart people, and the forces of agglomeration draw people together. So when you try to take that lesson and apply it to Connecticut, where we have, is it 6 cities with over 100,000 or over something, but none under. Anyway, we've got to this incredible dispersion of people and a whole bunch of small cities and then 169 towns. What's the system architecture that will help people access these networks easily? It doesn't feel easy to get anywhere in Connecticut, even though when you overlay Silicon Valley over Connecticut, they're about the same size. And people don't have a problem driving 45 minutes in Silicon Valley, but they do here. So what does that mean? What we were worried about was developing a system in which we've got a little bit of money to use to blow on these sparks as a state, and all 169 towns are going to say, right here, I am the place, and we'd end up with 8 or 50 innovation hubs. The alternative. One alternative was, New Haven is the most organic, deep, body of entrepreneurship in the state. We could just dump it all there and let's develop one hub. That clearly wasn't going to fly, either politically or because of the structure of Connecticut's population and the fact that innovation actually is spread pretty widely around the state. So we ended up at for now, a model of 4 hubs relatively spread throughout the state, but it's an ongoing question. What is the right architecture to engage the state, and how does each town relate to the other towns around it? That's merely a stab.
What about for recruiting purposes though, or for these guys? I mean, they get out of school, they want to start a company here, and you're looking for a co-founder or employee number 1. I don't know that I would know what network to go through besides Craigslist, which, we've used, and there's a lot of talented people hanging out on Craigslist. Some other people hanging out on Craigslist also, I should be careful of them. We really leverage our own network at this point, our own community, which is not geographically located or tied to a geography. But I'm not sure I'd know how to find that talent outside of New Haven and bring them in. Because I think that's really important. This is Derek and I are on this Kendall Square thing. 9th Square is going to be Kendall Square. I hate to tell Science Park that, but it's just true. It's going to be. it's got that right focus, and it's really small, and it's got the right vibe for
It'll
being
get
that
so
kind of
big
thing.
that it's going to take over science parks.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Spiritually, not
9
geographically.
big squares.
So what are you doing about talent? Is that
Well, so I actually, before we get to talent, one of the things that, and it's kind of related, but one of the things that Ben kind of prompted me on earlier was Startup Weekend. So, you know, this idea of politically and geographically, we've got kind of boundaries that we think about. It's important in some ways, but it's kind of unimportant in other ways. You know, if you're starting a company, you don't really care that somebody's from Milford or from Hartford. If they're the best co-founder and they can help you get your company off the ground, and you really feel the chemistry, it doesn't, at that point, nobody cares, right? If you get funding, you don't really care where it comes from. So the idea of just really kind of creating critical mass of people and making it interesting for people to come, I think is key. We've had developers from ESPN come to Startup Weekend, people from, really not, they're a series of people who have the same kind of passions, concerns, aspirations that kind of a cross-section of the population has in the entrepreneurial world. So a developer in ESPN might be really, really interested in starting a business and not really know how. So one of the reasons that we do consistently monthly events, we have one called Launch Haven that kind of focuses just on pitching and meeting people in the community, but also Startup Weekend, New Haven, which wasn't our idea. It's a startup out of Seattle that created this kind of powerful format for getting a bunch of people together and trying to get them in a space where they can help each other with experience, knowledge, work, to launch companies in a 54-hour format. The reason that we do have events like that is because they kind of create this space to convene people who feel like they want to do something in the startup space and they're not sure what. And by rapidly kind of combining those people and getting them to work together in little ways, roll up their sleeves, they start to get to know each other. They start to get to know who can help, who can't, and where to take the next step. So coming back to the Startup Weekend point, I think it is really powerful. We do it every year, and we do it because we get about 150 people from the community who want to see the pitches, want to come out and work on a team, try a new idea. And you might see, 10% of the people might be the same people as last year working on the next big thing that they're trying to launch. So it's a really great format, and we'll do it again this coming November.
Cool. I'd also, I'd say Tuesdays at Make Haven is a great place to start meeting people. Last night, I hadn't been in a while, and Make Haven is this makerspace that was referenced earlier. It's on State Street in 9th Square. And on Tuesdays, we have an open space night, and last night there were 9 students from Quinnipiac in the electronic or digital media program, person interested in sustainability and tech from who works in the city of Bridgeport, a few guys from Brantford who are engineers, some of the folks from my company, and other folks from around the 9th Square, and it really, I think for the first time to me, that felt like, oh, this is Connecticut gathering around New Haven. This is what the grid is about. This is what an ecosystem is about.
What kind of things were people making then?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have 2 MakerBot 2s, and people were testing out 3D printing for the first time. The students from Quinnipiac were there to work on designing an interface for something to do with beer.
Whatever, though, they didn't quite know yet.
I think brewing was. I think that they were. There is one of our members has got a beer brewing idea, and they needed a user interface for that brewing machine he was planning on building. Funny how 9 people show up when that's the challenge, and saving the world maybe not as much.
I think there's a real issue in Connecticut about trying to find talent, though, because there is. So I moved here October of 2011 and moved to Hartford, and you could very quickly see the energy that New Haven has vis-a-vis these other cities, and it just had a draw. So even though we lived in Hartford, we kind of were looking to see could we rent here in New Haven, because it did have that kind of dynamism and vibrancy.
Yeah.
And so that's a real draw, and I think where we sit, where Casey and I sit anyway, having statewide responsibility, we need to be really sensitive to the fact that we're not putting all the cards into one place.
Right.
But when you're looking at how do you actually make a productive regional economy, one of the things we know is that cities really drive things, and cities drive a lot of that effort. So hence the hub structure and the hub model. But it'll be fascinating to see what actually evolves, because what might happen is that these places that have opportunities, that have ways that people combine around make havens, around launch havens, and that will just draw people who want to do more of that, and you have this accumulation factor that just piles up. I think where I sit, what I'm concerned about is to make sure that the places like Waterbury, Hartford, Avon, also Danbury, places that were really strong back in the 1950s, 1940s, they have entrepreneurs there too. They have people making awesome companies. So how do we build front doors so that they can access the same type of opportunities inside New Haven, but even take those back, and there's a lot of networks and connections. So I think transportation, feeling like if I live in Hartford, I've got more friends here than I've gotten in another state in Boston. So I will just gravitate over somewhere inside Connecticut rather than gravitate to a bigger center elsewhere.
Right.
So that's the whole sticky community aspect, is to say it is about friends, it is about peers, it is about those really kind of motivation interactions with others. And I think we want to make sure that those people who really inspire us, we can have all those people meet, and it not be based on hope and chance, but now it's based on actually strategy, implementation, intention. And that's a real element of this.
Yeah.
I get a kick out of the fact that the best answer I can think of to the question, how do you create more community, I think turns out to be the very simple answer: karaoke.
That's fair.
Derek has put together a couple of karaoke nights that are really hilarious. And there's an SOM grad who started the Karaoke Heroes downtown, which turns out to be a blast.
It's a new T-shirt that'll make
Yeah,
our karaoke
definitely.
heroes are better than your heroes.
Right.
Well, I'm going to pay that to the left. So ping pong is also a component of this. Ben and some other entrepreneurs have done, ping pong nights. So I think this idea of fun, you can create a structure, but if it's kind of lifeless, has no soul, nobody's really going to come out. So if you do, get up and sing karaoke. I've been criticized actually for singing Katy Perry songs, but you have to take risks as an entrepreneur. Sometimes you have to step up to the ping pong champion and lose just so you can put yourself out there. It's a joke. I'm joking, but it's an important part of the process.
I feel like I wouldn't be doing these guys justice, and I wouldn't be a good moderator if I didn't ask you to sing like at least one line of a Perry song.
Can we come back to that?
We can come back. Think about which line you want to sing.
To work up to that, yeah. Let me.
I think this one is specifically focused at Casey, but you guys can feel free to jump in. At the state level, why entrepreneurship? Why does this matter? It seems obvious to me, but what's obvious to me is not always obvious to our government.
Right. So, the short answer is, for a long time in economic development history, there's a guy named David Birch who did some research and put out the idea that it's small business that really matters to job growth in the late 70s. And that meme has become obligatory for all politicians to talk about small business. Some interesting data came out in 2010 that showed that it's not small businesses per se, but rather young businesses that are responsible for the majority of job growth. So someone finally got the age data and did the regression and found that the correlation is, or that the causality is actually the correlation is with age rather than size. That's interesting because it's interesting and problematic for Connecticut because we are overrepresented relative to other states in the percentage of our jobs that are in older, mature, and bigger companies. So in a sense, we're long on big companies in the state, and we're short on small, younger companies. That means that at sort of structurally, we're at a disadvantage because young companies grow their bottom line by growing. Older companies tend to grow their bottom line by becoming more efficient, which actually means shedding jobs. So the governor saw that and began asking, well, what can we do to help? How do we blow on the sparks of the entrepreneurial efforts that are already happening in the state to help grow more early stage companies? So that's the state's interest is job growth and revenue. And I can go on that topic for a long time. I'm going to stop and turn it back.
Do you mind if I add just one point? I think, there tends to be a little bit of a view that, so it's, good for job growth to have small companies. That's really great. We have a lot of big companies. We need more small ones. But actually, I think the big companies also need small companies. So I'll make a little bit of a plug for any large corporation that's in Connecticut to support this ecosystem project through corporate challenges and programs like that. Whether it's talent, finding software developers locally, or finding the next innovative idea. Really, the idea of an ecosystem is it needs to be in balance. There need to be small companies, mid-sized companies, big companies, and the reason that needs to happen is because if there isn't a balance in the ecosystem, it doesn't function well for anybody. So I wanted to put in a plug for that because I think a lot of times we focus on, how do we grow more ventures and why is that important? It's for jobs, but actually even at the top end of the ecosystem in these companies that are more established, this part of how they become innovative, part of why our economy has worked in the past and will work in the future is that we have these different kind of organizations and groups and entities that can solve problems. You're here to solve, environmental problems. Your part in the economy is huge, and it matters a lot to a big company. I think that's one thing in our country that we haven't quite hit the recognition that corporate America really, at the top end of the ecosystem really has a pretty huge responsibility to support innovation very directly. People like Ben, people like our Connecticut entrepreneurs, it's a very important part of their own vitality, not corporate social responsibility. It's part of them continuing to have a business and not turning into a buggy whip manufacturer.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of incredible older companies in the state. I mean, I think about UTC or Pitney Bowes. I picked those two examples because they've both got, they're both taking sort of Derek's challenge and figuring out how to invest in innovation through developing earlier stage companies. So Sikorsky has developed a partnership with the Stanford Innovation Center where they put out a couple of big challenges, thorny problems that they can't solve. The one that sticks in my mind is we want our helicopters to be able to change color at the touch of a button. So if you fly behind a white snow-capped mountain, I want it to turn white. If you fly into a field of leopards, I want it to turn leopard print.
Zartan from G.I. Joe figured that out.
Yeah, exactly. So they put out a whole bunch of challenges, and in a global competition, the couple of winners that came back with the coolest ideas, they sponsored them to go into the Stanford Innovation Center for a year, where they're co-working amongst all the other companies there and the other winners of the Sikorsky Challenge. And then Sikorsky might become a partner, might buy the company, might invest. Who knows what can happen? Anyway, that's that one. And then Pitney Bowes has made a similar challenge because they've got all this incredible mail equipment. And the mail system is at least changing a lot, being dramatically disrupted. They've got this cool technology, encryption technology, and they've put a kind of a different challenge saying, we've got all this stuff. What do we do with it? How can we open new markets for this kind of technology? And we're hoping that that's a pattern that starts to take hold in Connecticut, that more and more of our incredible big companies engage in that kind of partnership.
Excellent. I feel really lucky. I think we all feel really lucky at our company that we've kind of come up and been on our current trajectory under Daniel Malloy's administration. I'm not going to list all the benefits that we've gotten or taken advantage of. A lot of folks probably don't know about some of the things that are out there for young businesses, and that they are truly accessible and probably easier than getting a loan from somewhere, some of the other places. Not traditionally, not wrapped in bureaucracy the way you might traditionally expect. Can you speak to some of those? I think, Derek, you also probably have some thoughts on this as well. So both of you
Yeah,
guys.
sure. I mean, one of the governor's biggest goals coming into office was to, he called it reinventing Connecticut, but change the state's approach to business. Some history that I learned as I got involved in this role, and so I came through the joint degree program with School of Management and Forestry. I'd come here specifically to focus on entrepreneurship and economic development, green entrepreneurship, green economic development, and got really interested in how innovation works. I started a company with my best friend Adrian Hortan right over there, who's now a venture capitalist, and kicked it off in the Sabin Prize. Anyway, I then got involved in the challenge of how do we make the state a better place for entrepreneurship, and was lucky enough to be drafted into the Molloy administration, which is really cool. He's one of the governor's main goals is to reinvent the state's approach, because we'd had 16 years of basically the same administration that had so Governor Rowland had been very, very tight to the point where he ended up going to jail with business. His lieutenant governor took the opposite approach and said, I want nothing to do with business, and sort of closed off communication to the point where when I did some research in 2010, interviewing CEOs about how the state could be a better place for their company and other companies like theirs, they said, I would just like to have a relationship with the governor. I don't need help much, but when I do, I want someone to pick up the phone, and so that became a major issue. So new administration in 2010, Governor Molloy wanted to change that and adopted a number of approaches to doing that, one of which was the Small Business Express program, which is sort of a counter-cyclical loan program. Given that the bank loans have dried up for small business, the government has stepped in to fill that gap. So it's actually, as long as you do it soon enough, and now they've just re-upped, you can apply for grants and loans to support a small business if you are growing jobs. They also recapitalized Connecticut Innovations, which is the state's venture capital arm, with $25 million new per year for the next 5 years to be able to increase their ability to invest in more and more companies. There's international trade help available from the Commerce Department's State of Connecticut office. There is an SBIR office, Small Business Innovations office, housed in Connecticut Innovations, that helps connect people to, and they've got a great internship program, connecting people to early stage companies. They've got a go, no-go technology assessment tool that they can do. The main thing is that they help you apply, as a company, apply for an SBIR grant, which is a 2-stage innovation grant from the federal government, and they'll help put together your program. That's only a very small fraction of the kinds of help from the state that are available. State help is not necessarily the most important help. There's lots of other kinds of assistance, mentorship, investment, education that you can get from lots of different players. But this effort, innovation ecosystem effort, is a part of that effort to try to connect all of those different resources that exist and make the pathways easier for entrepreneurs to figure out what's appropriate for them and then find their way to those things.
That's great.
I'll just build on that for a second. I mean, one of the things that, as Casey's going through that list, there's a lot of stuff out there. And so one of the things we hear from entrepreneurs a lot is it's really hard to actually navigate and find the right path to get to where that resource is, and especially figure out what's the right support for me right now. And so one of the major pieces of this whole project is called Growth Company Advising. And so that's a fancy term we've given to someone who sits in every single innovation hub who actually works with a company in a way a social worker works with a client, really taking ownership for that company's success. And so in New Haven, the partner's Rohit Sharma, who works out of the Economic Development Corporation. And so Rohit's here. We've got 2 people in Stamford, people in Hartford and Storrs. And one of the things we've learned is that unlike other states and other programs are really narrowly defined on defining that program. If it's a loan opportunity, you would apply for a loan, and then once those funds are granted, that a loan officer doesn't take a lot of time to understand what else that company needs. And so having someone who's really looking holistically at that firm is a really important element that I think is really differentiates this program from some other opportunities that are out there. Derek, I'll just...
Yeah, no, that's a great point to mention. And I guess the follow-on to that is that a lot of the tools that Ben was talking about, in case we were talking about coming from the state, that this growth company advisor might direct to companies, and they really fall into 5 categories, and they're really the bread and butter of what these hubs are trying to deliver. Entrepreneurs face usually common obstacles in about 5 areas. One is finding capital, and in different stages, small capital to big capital. Talent, whether it's an engineer, mechanical engineer, a software developer, somebody who can sell your product. Talent's really important. Finding mentors and education is really key. Community is obviously very important. And the last one, which might not sound quite obvious, is space. Not in a commercial real estate sense, but we all know the story of the entrepreneur that started in the garage. And, garage is a really bad place to start a business, in my opinion. An attic is as well. It's very isolating. Actually, we're starting to see finally that entrepreneurship is kind of owning up to the fact that there are issues of depression and all kinds of problems with being isolated and kind of starved from community. So actually, one of the reasons that we focus on community is that getting out of the garage, getting out of the attic puts you, if you can get to a co-working space, if you can find a place like Make Haven where you can tinker with your idea and you can sit and talk to Ben about the fact that you have been eating ramen noodles for the last 2 weeks, that actually is surprisingly important to this whole equation. So these 5 tools that I just mentioned, these obstacles, each of the hubs has tools that solve these problems for entrepreneurs. And I'll just mention one of them that's really important in the area of money. So Adrian's over there, he's a venture capitalist, but he wants to see you do something worthwhile before he's gonna, invest money in your company. And you are sitting there saying, well, great, but how do I build something worthwhile without the money? So a state program that is really fantastic is this program called the Innovation Voucher Program. So you're starting out, you need to find some kind of prototyping capital, some kind of R&D capital. You can access a $10,000 grant. You can do it quickly. You don't have to go through a lot of red tape. And once you've gotten that 10K, you work with a service provider who's an expert in whatever field you're trying to R&D in, and bam, you've got some product. You can take it to Adrian and say, here you go, dude. We delivered, give us the Series A funding, let's go. So, obviously, low percentage scenario that will happen, but the point is that one of the really great programs and thoughtful programs that the state has put in place is just, like a micro grant to get you started. Doesn't take a lot of time to get it going, doesn't take a lot of time for you to start accessing that capital, but can prove really, really fruitful when it comes to actually getting to the later stage of the process. So it's a plug for one program.
Yeah, that's great. I want to hear about some more of those. I have this friend. She worked in a hotel in New Haven. She did a great job as an employee of the hotel. She had some ideas for a business, and I was the friend who told her to quit her day job. She did that. She created another business. I think it's sustainable, but she's looking at the next thing. She's capable. She's got a great idea. She wants to start it's kind of related to this. She wants to start a food incubator kitchen. I think she needs funding. I think she needs guidance. She's one person. she has experience in that industry, but she's going to need support. What can you guys do for her? How, using that as an anecdote, how do we help how do we help this individual? It may not be a business that ever gets venture funding, right? But it's a business that might launch the next Shake Shack, right? And so it could be vital to this ecosystem that we're trying to create. So how do we help those little guys that keep the rest of the world, our world's exciting?
Take me through the process.
I was actually going to reply karaoke is the answer, but I might have to sing if I bring that up again. If I bring that up again, I might be forced to do a little beatboxing. Yeah, so, I mentioned it before, I think, everything comes down to me in this world to a kind of a one-on-one relationship. So the role of this growth company advisor is there, but really anybody who's involved in the hub, whether it's Ben, Casey and people at the state level or local entrepreneurs are really, here to get that person to the right person who can help them. So at the end of the day, whether or not, your friend talks to you about it and you bump them over, or whether they come to us directly, it doesn't really matter, but we want to sit down and kind of unpack where are you with your business. So entrepreneurs are not kind of monolithic any more than corporations are. So some people have got an idea, not very well fleshed out, but has some promise. Some people have something that's very well defined. They've spent their own money to prototype, or they've built something. They're a software developer. So you really can't kind of apply any hard and fast rules to what people are going to need when they walk in the door. So that first few sets of conversations are really important to understanding, is this a person who really needs to be hooked up with somebody like Ben, who's done something in the same industry before, who can learn and be inspired from an entrepreneur? Or do they need an innovation voucher? Do they need a mentor? Do they really need a technical co-founder to get their idea off the ground? These are all things that the hub can do for an entrepreneur, but we can't do any of them until we sit down and talk about with the entrepreneur what they're doing. And I think I think a lot about the kind of the values that make a great ecosystem, and one of them is being honest. So sometimes an entrepreneur comes in and thinks, look, I need to have a technical co-founder for my business, I need an army of software developers, or I need a lab space. If I could just get this, or if I could just get $1 million of money from Adrian, this thing would be in the bag. And that's not always true. The entrepreneur is sometimes deluding themselves. I've been there myself, actually. And so it's really important that not that someone tells you what you want to hear, but that when they sit down with you, they say, look, based on my experience, you don't need any of that money until you can figure out your business model and how you're going to make this thing sustainable. And that's the first question you need to really map out. So don't bother to engage software development company, don't bother to try to hire somebody, just figure out this one problem, and then let's take it from there. So again, the focus is on this first conversation, and that might again sound like a platitude, but it really isn't. I think at the end of the day, Casey said it best earlier on, building a venture is all about kind of a series of people knocking an idea around and figuring out how to make it work, putting themselves in harm's way in many cases, and getting it off the ground. So it really does come down to relationships and having conversations that are really honest, but come from, a place where you want to help the person. You're not, just trying to be mean, but you're trying to be honest and get them on the right track. So that's my explanation of the process. Maybe you can add.
Yeah, I mean, Tim has worked with all the participants of this whole system to map out to create a real system of it, so it's not haphazard. And there's a system in which you can go to the website, CTNEXT.com, fill out an assessment form that takes about half an hour, and then someone in Derek's shop or one of the other shops wherever you are in the state will look it over, get in touch with you with some initial help, and then if you're the kind of company with the kind of, or you've got the kind of idea that can really scale, we'll engage with you at a deeper level and figure out all the ways that we can be of help. But I think the two answers are go to ctnext.com and fill out an assessment, or just talk to Derek or Tim or myself. We'll leave our information here. And take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, so after that whole process, there's an action plan that gets developed. And so a lot of this comes out of what is the action plan for your company? What's the next step? What's the vision? And let's kind of map ourselves backwards from that point. I think the example about the food kitchen is interesting because it really gets to the point that Connecticut is a small state. We're 3 million people. Cities are bigger than our state is. And so part of this whole project is saying maybe the right person for that friend to connect to is actually living somewhere else, and they're not in the 9 Square area, they're not in the New Haven area. How do we find them? And so another element of this is being able to connect that person's very specific needs to potentially the right mentor, the right coach, the right sector expert who's living in, say, Norwalk or Norfolk or someplace that they wouldn't just never connect with him about. So Derek would send a note to, or Rohit, the growth advisor, would send a note to a growth advisor in another part of the state who would have access to that person who has that expertise. And that's a real piece of it. And so I talked about taking chance out of it. And it's really trying to say, well, let's create, well, I'm thinking now SeeClickFix. You want to get someplace with a single click. So how do we have the least amount of clicks, the least amount of steps to get to the right support?
Right.
And so it's about that.
Great. I'll connect her with all of you guys.
Can I add one more tactical point?
Yeah.
So this every third Thursday of the month, we do something called Launch Haven in New Haven. And although there's a web forum, and there are lots of different ways to connect with us, probably that's the best catch-all. You meet 50 people at one time, get a sense of the community right away. So I would put in a plug for that. And I'm also going to defer my karaoke singing to that event. So if you do want,
Hopefully.
there always has to be a teaser. So if you do want to see a karaoke performance by any of the 4 of us, I'm going to commit all of us to being there on March 21st. So come out. And if you know someone who's an entrepreneur who needs same kind of community, have them come out.
And that's at Karaoke Heroes.
Yes.
What time?
6 p.m. is the beginning, and it will go however long it needs to go.
And I know that you guys are all, or some of you are engaged in the Sabin Venture Prize competition right now. This community is here to help you now. Given your current stage of idea, now's the time to connect. And I know that we only got a couple months before the pitch in this room or up on the hill. We're here to help you get there and win.
Okay, I'd like to open up to these guys, I think. Do you guys have? Yeah, all right, excellent. Oh, we even have a mic, cool.
I Anastasia Urok, graduate of this school and started a company here 5 years ago. I wish you guys had been around 5 years ago. I have a couple of ideas. One is I've been working lately from home. I'm totally sick of it. I'm looking for space, so I'm going to follow up with you on that. But I've been working in different libraries, so I kind of get bored and move around in the kind of shoreline area in New Haven. And I've just noticed that there's a lot of people hanging out in libraries, working away on their computers. I don't see many books being read. And I wonder if you've thought about outreach to get people from the library kind of world into what you want to do and connecting with them. Just an idea. And, as it happens, I was sitting next to someone on a plane to Dallas, and he was the head of the public library in Dallas, Texas, right? And he was saying how they've been using their library space for exactly this sort of hub-like purposes, because they see that there's a need in the community and they want to encourage entrepreneurship. And it sort of opened up this whole idea for me of like using this space that's often really good. Connecticut has great small public libraries everywhere. So that was just one thought I had for you. If you've thought of that as well, I'd be curious. I had another idea, but that's it for now. I can't remember it, sorry.
Does the state do marketing for these ecosystems in the public libraries?
In the library, in the libraries, no. So that's a wonderful thought because, coffee shops as well are places that people hang out at. So what we have learned is that entrepreneurs hang out online, and so we would not take out a lot of print advertising. We wouldn't take out a lot of kind of TV advertising, but it really is about going to where they are. And what our research has showed us is that it's on LinkedIn, it's Facebook, it's on blogs. But I think to your point, there is an element about reaching out to people who are really at that early stage and they're still doing neat things, but could use some other peer support groups. And so libraries is fascinating. I'm glad you mentioned that.
I should also say my friend in Chicago ran a pretty substantial advertising campaign for his neighborhood-based business in the Chicago library system and had a phenomenal success with that. That was like the #1 marketing success that they had. Mostly because there's not that much noise in libraries, advertising noise. I mean, thank God. But
So was it print?
yeah,
Posters up
yeah,
on the
they
wall?
had. I think they were bookmarks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
That's good.
And are you familiar with the Grove? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm William, and a first-year student here at the FES. So you guys talked a lot about the hub idea, and it sounds like a pretty good, nice way to concentrate on the talent and resources in one place. But what about the places, like other places in Connecticut that doesn't currently have the hub? Do you see like a sort of marginalization of these businesses and new entrepreneurs because they don't have access to the same resources that you guys are having?
It's a great question, and one that I've been asking Derek lately. and he's been doing an amazing job of reaching out to Waterbury, Hamden, Deep River, and engaging with their chambers of commerce and some incubators that are around, and sort of trying to figure out how to make a network.
Yeah, you're really on point. I mean, in this process that the state has gone through, I mean, they had to pick, as Casey mentioned, they had to pick some kind of structure. So one of the reasons that our innovation hub is called the Grid, other than the fact that the New Haven colony planned out the town on a 9-square plan called the Grid, that's one of the obvious origins of our name. But the other reason that we picked the name is that, I mean, I guess our belief is that we're going to be a lot more effective if we treat whatever we're doing here as really just connected to other entrepreneurial activities, not a replacement for it, and certainly not kind of a statement that innovation only happens within this innovation hub, which would be kind of misguided and I think not produce the results that we want to achieve. So the Grid idea is, the way we're implementing that kind of concept is to go to towns like Waterbury, talk to the city, talk to the economic development people and say, look, you know, there's no reason the Grid can't apply to you. The Grid can't be a phenomenon in the 2 counties that we serve. So we've been going out to Deep River and Hamden and Waterbury and other places and starting to just say, what can we do? Can we come and give a presentation? Can we do a program here that we would otherwise have done in New Haven? And it's important, I think, because we were in Deep River and we're sitting with the first selectman and he says, hey, you know, we have this incubator. Do you want to go see it? And we say, oh, well, you know, okay, that sounds interesting. So we drive, 6 miles down the road, following him, and we end up at a company that does modeling and prototyping for Covidian and all these interesting companies in this region. Never heard of them before. 9-person company, sounds like they're growing like gangbusters. We would not have known that they existed if we didn't go and ask the question. So, and it's, especially in our age, I think it's really easy to get lulled into the sense of, well, if we blog about it and we get on Facebook and we, put out an email, everybody's going to know. I mean, that's definitely not true in Connecticut. So this idea of getting out and, talking to people and showing up, that's half the battle in any business. But it's really a crucial part of what we're trying to do. It's hard, but it's crucial.
I mean, I think what's happening now is we've got phase 1 of this project. So this project launched last October officially. So we haven't been at it for a long time. The thinking has been percolating for a while. But the actual planning of what the systems and the processes look like, that's still very recent. When you think about it, I think phase 2, phase 3 of this is really going to open it up to be much more active in places like Waterbury and Deep River, understanding how they connect in a much more significant way to the hub and kind of to these places that have a lot more people and concentrated entrepreneurial action. And so we have started talking about it from a conceptual point of view. What does it look like to have Waterbury in a much more active way as a node in this network? What would that mean? What's the commitment from them? What's the commitment from us? So I think just right now where we're at is really, let's get the process right so we get the entrepreneurs supported, and then after that we can expand it out. But it's an ongoing concern to make sure that right now they don't feel left out. And I think to Derek's point about the PR and you have to reach out, and this really is about entrepreneurs in startup companies are sometimes young. I haven't seen stats on it, but it seems anecdotally they would tend to be younger. But I know it's not by a lot. Like there are really great entrepreneurs who are 50, who are 60. But when you get into stage 2 companies, and so those are companies that are over 10 people, would probably have a product in the market, would have revenues, would have profit. Those are business leaders, and they could be any age. And so they've got kids, they've got families, they're not wasting time on Facebook and other things the way that other people are, that I am. And so there is a need to have a big multi-channel approach to make sure that we're kind of knocking on doors, sending them flyers, doing bookmarks at the local library. I mean, all these things are part of how this word gets out.
Thanks. My name's Jeff Woodward. I'm a second-year student in the joint MBA-MEM program between the School of Forestry and School of Management. You talked a little bit about young entrepreneurs, and one of the things I see in our generation and a younger generation is that it's a very mobile generation. You know, folks are not afraid to move places and to locate in various places across the country. So given that, what's your pitch for why New Haven or why Connecticut is the best place for someone to start their company right now?
Can I go first?
Yeah, sure.
So I think each of us will have a different answer. I mean, I think the pitch that I would have to an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs love to build stuff. And I think Connecticut is at a point where not only are you building a company, you're also building Connecticut. And so it really is an opportunity to be a lot more than simply the company that you have, but it's also about building this much more larger community. So that's a key piece.
I think, yeah, 2 answers. One is that we are working incredibly hard to make this a better place, and you've got incredible leaders like Ben and Derek in New Haven in particular, who are not only working hard at it, but they're really good at it, and they're really fun as well. This is a fun place to be in to start your business. The other answer is actually by looking around the room. So I came out of this program as I was getting ready to graduate. My wife was in the program as well, and we looked around, looked at our other friends, looked at Adrian, Anastasia, looked at Stuart DeQ, who runs CBay, and of our 13 best friends in the program, 10 of them were all doing the same thing, saying, are you staying? I was thinking about staying. What are you? And so it became the place where we could stay with the coolest people we knew, and we just sort of all convinced each other to stick around, and it's been heaven. This is an awesome place to be after graduating, still to be involved in this community. It's just a heck of a lot of fun, and there's a ton to do, and incredible people who've made similar choices over the years that you end up connecting with. And now I've made friends with these guys. Tim came in. There's a whole group of folks who have a lot of fun and build really cool companies here.
Do you want to hear another version of the answer, or?
Are you convinced yet?
If you have another one, I'd love to hear it.
I have one, and that is that there are big ecosystems that are extremely attractive to entrepreneurs, and sometimes entrepreneurs move there for really, really good reasons. But one of the things that's a special advantage of being in a place like Connecticut or New Haven is that you can actually know a lot of the entrepreneurs. You can be sitting in her room, and I keep picking on Adrian, I feel bad, but you can meet people who are in the space, and it's not crowded. There isn't a ton of noise. You're not fighting against 3 other people with the exact same idea. Maybe Connecticut will be at that point at some point, but right now it's a place that's really accessible. We have a lot of great communities. It's a great place to live. So I think it's more niche and less mass market, and there's something that's really powerful about that, in my opinion. It's actually, in a lot of ways, appeals to the entrepreneur's desire to get the maximum resources. You know, you're probably going to get more resources here than you are in a bigger ecosystem on average. That's what I would say.
A big fish, small pond effect.
Yeah, there is some of that. The big fish, small pond thing, without it feeling like the pond is too small.
Right.
I think, you know, for me, you start a business, you're going to sacrifice your current quality of life for a future quality of life or a feeling of satisfaction, right? That you'll probably keep striving for forever because you're an entrepreneur, right? But to that point, why should you really sacrifice that quality of life, right? If you live in Manhattan, you know what you're going to be living in, unless you're coming from money or something, or have had a successful exit elsewhere. You know, if you're living in Silicon Valley, you're going to be living in a suburb. You're not going to be walking or biking. I don't know if you guys have been to Google's campus, but as cool as it looks on the outside, it looks like every other pharmaceutical company in the United States on the outside. You know, for me, I haven't had to sacrifice any of my quality of life. It's only been surrounded by, you know, I've lived inexpensively and well, and walked and biked to work every day for, you know, 5 years. I've made awesome friends. I've ate the best food in the world. I travel constantly, and I am always so happy to come back to New Haven. I never get bored here. And on top of that all, you know, the rail line will take you to Providence or Boston or New York without having to be in New York or Boston, where someone can say, no, we don't need to Skype. Let's set up a meeting and let's do lunch and let's do all these distracting things that really keep you from running your business, so that if you have to meet them, you have to get on a train to do it, which when you are focusing on your business is a really, really good thing. Yeah. Not having people walk right into your office from the entire world is a great thing. And when they do in New Haven, it's usually for a reason, and you usually welcome them, and they can usually help you, or you can help them, and it's not at the point of distraction. But it, you know, at the end of it all, it's the food.
Can I make one pitch while I have a minute? Which is, I started in this economic development world by taking an internship with the organization that Tim works directly for, and it was the coolest internship I've ever had. I learned a tremendous amount, and it was a blast, and I'm still involved in that with that organization a lot. And we are looking for new interns this summer, and we guarantee you a tremendous learning experience, a lot of fun, and meeting a ton of the coolest people in Connecticut.
And the Grove is your home base in Connecticut, so you would have an office out of the Grove. So that's also a really great thing.
I also want to add one other point about New Haven. I could go on forever about this, and this is not a uniquely New Haven thing, but this is, I think, unique to towns like New Haven, where you have this mentality that we could be better, right? That we could do things better, that we're on the way up, and that we're not at some saturation point or some, like, you know, benchmark that other people have achieved, and that there's like, the entire community is somewhat focused on self-improvement in a way. And having that, you know, I mean, if that is the premise to the ecosystem, right, and you're an entrepreneur in that ecosystem, and you're saying, I'm here to create jobs, and I'm here to, you know, make my neighborhood better, I'm here to do something interesting that has never been done before, most people are going to support you because they believe that that holistically supports New Haven. Hugely valuable.